Welcome back to the audio files. It's a lot of time goes by, not much happens. We've got like a whole big pile of cinder blocks here, and eventually the weather and the stars will align and a stonemason will come out and they'll start putting this stuff together. I thought it would be this week. It's going to be next week. Welcome to Tennessee. Anyway, same place, and now we're back at the entrance to the listening room. Only now there's like a lot of leaves piled up because it's fall. And you come up here, and now we've got a foundation sitting here waiting for these cinder blocks to go in. And while this is all going on, I thought maybe this would be a good time to try and bring people up to date on the trip so far and why we're doing what we're doing. And I wanted to correct a statement that I made in the last video where I said someone designed this. So what I want to correct is that someone was me. I designed all of this. I have an architect who designed the bedroom and the laundry and the closets and some of that stuff. He helped us out a lot with the floor plan. But when it comes to the listening room and where the listening room is, every single thing that pertains to the listening room, that's 100% on me. So good or bad, however this thing winds up being, I'm going out on a limb doing all this stuff before it's even built. And maybe it's a mess. I kind of doubt it. And after I go through everything and I explain what's going on and why we're doing what we're doing, I hope you come to understand why. I'm repeating myself. I hope you come to understand why it is that it's very, very likely that this is going to wind up being a really good listening room. And the goal is a few of you people out there will take this stuff to heart, study some of this stuff, figure it out, and go on to build your own listening rooms and be happy with the results instead of being like all these other people that are, I threw $20,000 at this and then I had to rip it all out and start all over again. And they just went from one Band-Aid fix to another Band-Aid fixed. Sometimes spending a lot more than $10 or $20 or $30,000, a lot of money and the time and effort. So anyway, let's show you my plans. I want to show you what it is that I'm doing and explain how it is that I got to be doing it this way. So these are the plans for my room, and this is what we've been looking at right there. Just that. That's what all the fuss is about. And on the left-hand side is notes, kind of cliff notes of some of my research. And you can see a golden ratio for this room, for any room, is 1 to 1.6 to 2.6. So whatever the height of the ceiling is, it's 1.6 times as wide and 2.6 times as long. And in this case of a room, it would yield 11-foot ceiling, 18 feet wide, and 29 feet long. The reason for these golden ratios, sound travels in waves, waves reflect. When they bounce back, they reinforce or they cancel. They create regions of modes where the frequencies add together and your sound in that area is much higher volume, and they create cancellation areas where your frequencies are canceled out. Most people notice the biggest problems with these at low frequencies in the bass, where there's big suckouts or boominess in certain parts of the room, but they happen at every frequency across the sound range. It's just that when you get up into the higher frequencies, most rooms aren't just square flat surfaces that are like mirrors, so you don't notice the higher frequencies that are combing and causing the same problems, although you will notice it if you listen in a very empty room, which is something that I've done. The next ratio is what is called a modern ratio, and that would be 0.6 to 1 to 1.62. And that yields my room, which is 11-foot high ceiling, 18 feet 4 inches wide, and 29 feet 8 inches long. And what this represents is the ideal relationship or ratios that will spread out in these mode frequencies and have them as few and as far between and spaced out as possible. They don't clump together. An extreme example of what I'm talking about would be if you had a room that was 10 by 10 by 10, then the same wave is going to bounce back and be reinforced from every direction of the room, creating a huge, huge base mode and suck out region that will depend on whatever the size of the room is. The larger the room, the lower that frequency goes. And the larger the room, the more it inherently helps to spread out these waves or these modes. So what I've done is I've simply chosen the larger modern ratio, which the main reason that it is a better choice is because it is a little bit larger. You'll notice that the same 11-foot high ceiling yields a little 4-inch wider and 8-inch longer room. It's not very much, but every little bit helps. And so it doesn't cost that much more to go a few inches bigger each way. So that's what I did. The 11 feet, by the way, is just kind of an arbitrary number that I pulled out simply because it's a nice round number, and it's also a nice round number that yields a room that's about the size that I wanted. The room that I had in Redmond was 17 by 24 with a 9-foot ceiling, and the ratios weren't perfect because it was a remodel and I didn't have any choice. And the room could have been a little bit bigger, and increasing the height of the room is a relatively easy way to get extra volume, which greatly improves the acoustic performance of a room. If you watch the other videos that I made on my trip, you'll hear me talking about this. It's like one of the things that you notice when you go in a lot of different rooms and you pay attention to the room. Most people fixate on the equipment and they don't really think that much about the room. And if they do think about the room, they look at the things that they see that are obvious, the stuff that's stuck on the walls or the things that are sitting in corners. And they like these pretty shapes and stuff like this. And I don't even know where they get these ideas, but that's the way most people think about it. They don't think that the entire room, every surface of it, the material that it's made out of, and the construction, the way it's made, all those things impact the sound. So anyway, we start off with those dimensions. The walls are 2x10s with 5/8 inch plywood veneer on the inside of the room. I'm not using sheetrock. This will, I think, greatly improve the sound of the room, because at least the rooms that I heard, which would be basically huge room, sounded remarkably good. And I'm sure that a big part of that was because it was plywood and not sheetrock. And then on the outside of that wall is 1/2 inch OSB and 1/2 inch MDF over that. That's all screwed and glued together to make a massive rigid shell around the outside of the room. On the inside of the wall is 2 inches of activated carbon, and those are going to be in panels that fit inside the stud space, and they effectively turn each stud space into a diaphragmatic absorber. And I'm going to be talking about this a lot more in future videos. Then I've got 0 inches, 2 inches, or 4 inches of board, of insulating board in each stud space. What does that do? That's that rigid foam board, and what that does is it takes up a certain amount of volume in each stud space, because each stud space is a diaphragmatic absorber. And by using 0 inches of insulation in there, you have a larger air volume, and that tunes that particular stud to about 30 hertz. I could show you the exact numbers, and I could tell you how we got to that. And then if you have 2 inches, it tunes it to about 40 hertz. And if you have 4 inches, that smaller free airspace tunes it to about 50 hertz. So by doing 0, 2, and 4, I'm able to achieve 30, 40, and 50 hertz tuning or absorption. These represent the frequencies where the most attenuation occurs. There still is attenuation going off either side, lower and higher, of each of these bands, but that was their peak attenuation frequency. The ceiling is 2x16 I-joists, simply because if you're building something that has to span across 19 feet, you can't use 2x10s. You have to use something a lot bigger to be structural to support that wide of a span. And so, you're pretty much stuck with either something like this, an I-joist, or you have to go to something like a laminated beam, which is what Hue did, which greatly increases the cost and complexity of the build. And I'm trying to achieve a very high percentage of what Hue got by reducing some of these things down to where it saves me a tremendous amount of money. And I'm estimating it'll be something like probably 80 or 90% of the performance for like about 30 to 40% of the cost, something like that. It's hard to say. It's hard to even say what a room like this costs, because you had to have a room, and it was going to be a concrete slab. So there was going to be a concrete slab one way or the other. And you had to have walls going around it. And those walls on the exterior walls, those are like normal walls. Those are going to be there one way or the other. So and you had to have a ceiling. And the main difference really is just this part, which is this part right here, which is using 2x10s. Normally you wouldn't add that extra wall at all. But by creating this airspace between the house, the exterior wall of the house, and the interior wall of the room, with a dead airspace in between that goes all the way around the room and across the ceiling at the same time, you add a tremendous amount of acoustic isolation to prevent sound coming in and to prevent sound of the room coming out. Eventually, I'll be talking about the doors. There's going to be 2 doors. One door is attached to the inner wall. The other door is attached to the outer door. So that's pretty much enough for the room for now. There's a couple important points that I'd like to add on the build of this room. And one of those is, this isn't my first listening room, and it's not even my second listening room. I don't even know how to keep track of how many listening rooms I've done, because in my mind, every time I would set my stereo up in a room, that is my listening room. And so even though I didn't really build those rooms from the ground up, I nevertheless created those rooms by where I put my equipment in the room and the things that I did that I was able to do inside of the room to affect how it sounds. And I started doing this when I was 13 years old, riding my bicycle to Radio Shack and reading everything that they had in that store. I was a very polite little kid and stayed out of the way, sat down in a corner, pulled out a book or a magazine, and I would just sit there and read the darn thing, whatever it was. I'd read all the specifications. I'd try and learn as much as I could from the few people. Every once in a while, somebody was there that understood something better than I did. And so I started trying to learn all this stuff at a very young age. And not just learning it, but then I went home and I turned my bedroom into a listening room with acoustic panels and did all kinds of experimentation with where you could put the speakers and how you could set things up to make them sound better, and just having a heck of a time with all of that. And then I did all that through college and after college. And then back in the 90s, when I had my house and I remodeled it, I added a listening room. And back in those days, didn't have hardly any information on how to do these things. I went and paid Definitive Audio retainer to start designing my room. While they were supposedly working on the design of my room, I was scouring through Robert Harley's The Complete Guide to High-End Audio, which I highly recommend if you're into audio and you don't have a copy of that book, you haven't read that book, turn this video off and go read that book. Learn this stuff, and then come back. And this everything I'm talking about will just crystallize, and it will make so much more sense. And when you go on forums, you'll just be like, oh, I know that. Every dang question somebody asks on a forum in one way or the other, he's already covered it in that book. It's like his main contribution to audio is that book. So get that book and read it. But I'm working through that book, and it's got a section in there on how to calculate room resonances and modes. And so I was doing all of this, and I was thinking about the dimensions that I've got. And then I went to go visit Definitive Audio to see how that guy's doing. And you know what? I walk in on him, and you know what I see? He's got a notepad out and a pencil, and he's doing the same bloody calculations that I was doing from Robert Harley. Now, if somebody told you that today, that's one thing. Back 30 years ago when this was happening, okay, that's basically what you had to do, because there wasn't ray trace software out there. There wasn't YouTube with 50,000 different people telling you how to do this stuff and examples of, none of that existed back then. So on the one hand, it's kind of like, you know, on the one hand, I wasn't that surprised that that's what he's doing. But on the other hand, in the back of my mind, I thought, I'm paying this guy money. He must know a lot more than I do. And then I walk in, and it's like, he doesn't know the stuff I know even 30 years ago, you know? And so I told him flat out, I'm like, listen, man, I can do that. If that's all you're going to do, I can do that. And I didn't ask for my money back, but I'm like, you got to find something right now to show me that's worth you keeping the money that I've given you, which is just a deposit, really. And I'm like, you know, show me. We wound up walking into one of their rooms. Well, we had a professional guy that designed this room. It sounds really good, and your room is the same width as this room is. So I'm like, well, let's go in there with a tape measure. We're going to measure the length and the height of your room, and then that's what I'll do. And that's basically what I did. Now, you flash forward to today, and I've had all these decades of experience with that room. And I was in that room while it was being built. I know what it sounded like when it was just 2x4s and sheetrock, or just 2x4s and plywood, not even sheetrock, not even I heard that room at every step of the way with absolutely nothing in it, and all the way up until it was a finished room with nothing in it, and then a finished room with one thing after another being. I heard every change as this happened, and gained a tremendous amount of experience just from that. Brandon made a comment on one of my videos and said, yeah, well, that Redmond room is one of the very best rooms he's experienced. So, you know, it came out pretty good, even in spite of not knowing near as much as what I know today. That room was normal studs, 2x6 exterior wall, because that was code. One of the walls included the exterior siding because that was where the outside of the house had been. So we kept that. We added a 1/2-inch soundboard, 5/8 inch sheetrock, and then textured, and that was it. That was my room. And it was a really good room. Very happy with that room. So my main goal with this room is to simply be a little bit better than what I had. If that's all that happens, if I simply wind up with a room that's a little bit better than my old room in Redmond, I'll be very happy. I'll be pretty happy and relieved if I don't screw the pooch and wind up having spent all this money and gone on oh my God, I can't believe. It's April 1st, I've been on a mission trying to build this thing, and I still have almost a year to go. So it better turn out good. If it doesn't, I'll be honest, and I'll take my licks and I'll admit it. But for now, this is where we're going with this thing. And the other thing that I would add is that if you're doing something like this, or anything at all with your system, anything, you want to upgrade a component, whatever it is, anything, the first thing you have to know is yourself. You have to know, what is it that you really want? What is your real goal? And you got to be really, really hard-nosed and realistic on this. If your goal is to put together a system that's going to get a bazillion clicks on YouTube because it's got this Wadax, expensive, blingy, shiny, whatever the hell it is, then be honest about it. Go out and get all this super crazy expensive stuff and make it look fancy and set it up so it looks like your little audio shrine, and do like everybody else does, and but be honest about it, and like that's what you're doing, and amp it up, show that stuff off. If what you care about is the sound, well, you got to be honest. What aspect of the sound do you really care about? Do you have to have rock concert level? Do you listen to whatever music it is at a really high level, and it's important that that's like your number one thing? Well, you better be realistic about it and get components that are going to let you get to those high volume levels. Do you want fantastic imaging, or do you want depth of sounds? What is it that turns you on? Is there like some kind of music that you really only care about? You could care less if a trumpet sounds good, as long as that saxophone cranks, whatever it is. You got to be honest about these things. And so that's why I mentioned that my number one goal for this is simply that it be a better version of what I had in Redmond. I'm not trying to make something that's like Magico or Hue, for that matter. I don't have any particular standard out there that I'm trying to say, oh, I want to do this. It's got to be like that. Except for one thing, and the one thing was when I did see Hugh's room, I just absolutely loved immediately just the look of the place, the way everything was wood. It was obviously hit me like, this is a no nonsense, highly focused design. You could just tell by looking at it. It just didn't have all the blingy stuff sitting, you know what I'm talking about. Go just click anywhere on the internet. You will see what I'm talking about. Because I've only seen like Hugh's room is the only room that I've seen that just, it looked to me like, yeah, this guy's got like a audio room built here, and it's tasteful with the wood veneer finish. So anyway, those are the two main things. You have to know yourself, and you have to understand the acoustics, the physics of what is going into making it get those results. And that's why I'm showing you, things like this, because these ratios, they really matter. They have a profound impact on your room. And if you can do this right there, if you can do that, whatever size room it is that you can afford to build, it's going to sound better than if you don't do that. It's that simple. And if you can make the room bigger, that's going to help. There's probably some point where the room gets to be like too big, and I don't know that I'd want to go very much bigger than Hugh's. Hugh's room is only slightly bigger than this room that I'm building right now. It's only like, I don't know, about a foot, something like that. It's not much difference. Mike Levine's room is quite a bit bigger. The one at Shunyata is huge, but it's hard to tell because they have partitions and curtains that they pull across different areas of the room. Also, watch my videos. If you're serious about this, go and watch my videos and put up with all my lousy camera work and my awful YouTube production levels, which are just atrocious. It's not my thing. But watch those things and pay attention where I describe these rooms, because you have rooms that are out there like Bob Vineyard's where it's deceptive. And that's why I mentioned it. And you watch the video, it looks like he doesn't have a very big room. But acoustically, because of his large staircase and hallway going off in his back of his room is actually quite large. Or if you look at Deckware, it's the same thing in Deckware's room. If you watch, as I pan the camera around, you'll notice that room that at eyeball level looks like it's kind of like a normal living room size room. But in reality, the walls only extend up to like about 7 feet. And then everything from 7 feet up is all part of the same enormous room. His room there is probably more like 40 by 60 feet with a 15-foot ceiling or something like that. Go watch the video and see. It's like, it's hard to, it's a huge, huge room. If you watch Bill's room is another one that is larger than it seems, because he has stuff that's in there that makes it look like the walls in the room are this kind of like a normal living room size room. But when you come into the room, there's a wall, and that wall is really just a bunch of oscilloscopes and test gear and vintage equipment that he's gathered up over the years. It's not even a wall, and it doesn't go to the ceiling. So again, if you look at the total volume of his room, it's a large room. Tecton had one of the best sounding rooms. It's crazy because he wouldn't let me show it to you, because every direction you go with the camera, there's something going on somewhere that he doesn't want the competition to see, because they'll notice things that the average person wouldn't pick out, and he wants to keep his advantage. But the point is, his audition room, or whatever you want to call it, it's like a factory warehouse with the speakers stuck kind of over towards one corner of the room, and they're set up with your listening area. It's a very normal, very, very normal listening room, living room type situation, where the speakers are like about 8 or 9 feet apart, and you're sitting up like 8 or 9 or 10 feet away from the speaker, if that, maybe not even that much. But they're firing into this enormous space that's very convoluted. In other words, there's like it's not just an empty flat wall space. There's just all kinds of stuff everywhere, diffracting and diffusing the sound in every direction. And the ceiling is voluminous. The ceiling is probably 30 feet high. So the volume of your room, if anything you can do to make your room bigger, boy, go for it. And then try to keep those proportions right. And then try and avoid using materials that are going to make your room sound kind of blah, which is kind of what, unfortunately, sheetrock does. There's actually a company out there that sells stuff to accentuate the blah sound of sheetrock. They call it a resilient channel. Oh, well, go and listen to some rooms. Do what I've done. Travel around, get some experience. I think you'll find the same thing, and I know you will, because I can read the comments of the very, very few people who actually do take the time to listen. They can go beyond my crappy production values and listen to the substance of what's going on. And they wound up making some pretty pointed, clear, insightful comments. There's not very many of them, but there are a few of them, and I see them and I'm like, yep, there's a few people out there that are paying attention. So for you few guys, and by the way, I just let you know, I got like 18 new subscribers. Whoa, 18, it's whatever. For what I'm doing and the quality level that I'm doing it at and the way things are going, that's pretty amazing. But to be honest with you, if I have 3 people that are out there that are getting something out of this, I pat myself on the back. It's worth it. So anyway, I don't know. It's going to be like next week before the stonemason, whatever you call it, starts coming and putting some of the blocks in. And eventually we're going to get to framing. And when the framers start, then I think there'll be a lot more interesting stuff to show. And eventually the electrician's going to be wiring things, and I've got that pretty well figured out too. It's a pain having it, like, you can see it in your head, but it's going to be like a year coming to fruition. With that, I'm going to call it a video, and we'll see you next time. Ciao.